Previously on The Lost Kids.
There was a rumor started that Daniel had made it down the backside of the mountain and had joined a gang in San Diego and wasn't going to come back.
Numb, completely numb. We were like,
kind of paralyzed. What was do?
What's happening, and run away, and then
we say that what should we do?
What should we do? And then they said, we already report to the police, and then maybe you should hire a private investigator, and then he's pretty good. He find everyone.
It's a case that's haunted retired LAPD officer and private investigator Keith Raymond.
I don't have a word for it other than it's discouraging.
This is an ABC News story from January of 2019. That retired cop turned private investigator is a man named Keith Raymond.
For decades, he spent his career tracking down missing children, has helped find more than 300. Then there's Daniel Yuen.
But we never found him.
Missing since February of 2004, Daniel ran away from a controversial boarding school in the San Bernardino Mountains when he was 16. The school since shut down.
In this news report, Keith is being interviewed at a picnic table in Hilltop Community Park in San Diego. It's about a 2-hour drive from the old CEDU Running Springs campus. When Daniel Yuen ran away from CEDU back in 2004, his parents hired Keith to help look for their son. Back then, that search led to this park in San Diego. Now, almost 15 years later, Keith is looking for Daniel again.
Raymond says he just had to come back to the park. He brought his wife, and sure enough...
And within 5 minutes of being here, somebody said, I've seen that person 45 minutes ago.
If this is true, it would mean this private investigator walked into a park where Daniel had allegedly been spotted almost 15 years ago. And apparently Daniel, who would be 31 years old now, was there again, just 45 minutes earlier, walking through the park with a woman and a 2-year-old kid.
The case, hot again. The Center for Missing and Exploited Children even coming up with a new age-progressed photo of what Daniel might look like today, age 31.
I'm Josh Bloch. And this is The Lost Kids, a podcast from UCP Audio. Episode 6, Searching for Daniel. Since I started looking into what happened to Daniel Yuen after he was sent to CEDU Running Springs, I've learned a lot about the facility and the entire industry of these tough love programs for teens. But for Daniel's parents, Wayne and Lisa, they've really just been focused on searching for their son. And that search has involved another part of the troubled teen industry, the network of private companies and investigators who track down kids who run away. According to documents we received from the California Department of Social Services, CEDU Running Springs had numerous what they called escorts on call. As I've discovered, hundreds of kids ran away from CEDU. And when that happened, CEDU used these escorts to track them down. One of them was Keith Raymond. When Daniel ran away from CEDU on February 8, 2004, CEDU called his parents and suggested they hire Keith. The Yuens called him right away.
Yes.
Who called Keith? Do you remember?
I think I call.
And do you remember that first conversation with him?
I told him that my son's missing from CEDU and I need help to look for him. And he said yes. And then he sent me a piece of paper to sign and asked me to write him, I think, $2,000 money as a deposit.
Keith ran OHI Services, a private investigation firm with his wife Cindy. It was based out of Big Bear, California, not far from Running Springs. Over the years, Keith has made inconsistent claims about the number of CEDU runaways he's tracked down. Sometimes it's 150, sometimes 200. A former staff person told us that it was much less. Controversy seems to swirl around Keith. A quick Google search of his name, and you'll land on a website called Cheaterland. It describes itself as a place where victims can discuss their experience and report liars and cheaters. Keith Raymond is mentioned there by more than one person as a liar. There's also someone who appears to be Keith on the site, denying that claim. But when the Yuens called Keith in 2004, all they knew was that he was someone who could help find their son. According to CEDU records, when Daniel ran away, he was only wearing a blue windbreaker and sneakers. It was cold outside, with snow on the ground, and visibility was poor. Keith told the Yuens that he searched for Daniel in the woods around the campus, and even down the backside, that vast area behind the school that was steep and rocky, and almost impossible to traverse on foot.
It was wintertime, and he can track the footstep on the snow.
The ground search of the backside was made more difficult by the crappy weather. After a few days, the Yuens, on Keith's request, paid for a helicopter.
They found nothing. They don't see any footstep beyond that small area, the school. So they believe that Daniel must go to the street and able to get a ride, go down to San Bernardino.
When Daniel is missing, after that first phone call from CEDU, where they tell you that, what kind of updates are they giving you? Were they giving you additional information?
No, nothing. He just said that he's no longer in school.
Wayne says the story he got from CEDU about his son's disappearance kept changing. At first he was told 2 people witnessed Daniel running away. Later, no one did. Wayne says the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department were not much better. Wayne called them the day that Daniel ran away.
Honestly, think back, for missing person who, if they are reported as runaway, the police kind of don't care. They don't care.
The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department would not give us access to Daniel's case file, and the police officer in charge at the time, a guy named Robert Warwick, declined to talk with us. He did send a text saying he'd seen people burned for doing interviews with the media. The Yuens say they couldn't rely on CEDU or the police for help, so they hung their hopes on Keith and Cindy Raymond. Keith started calling Daniel's friends back in New Jersey to see if they had any information that could help. Dan's best friend, Nick Galeta, says Keith immediately rubbed him the wrong way.
I kept saying, something's wrong on that call. I said, something's wrong because we haven't heard from Dan. He hasn't called me. And I just kept saying it over and over again. And this guy on the phone stopped and said, you know, Nick, I've done a lot of these. And, people change. Friends change. So, that might be a reason why he hasn't called you. And I immediately just wanted to hang up the phone. And he definitely riled me up because I was like, there's just no way, dude. You cannot tell me that if you were in that situation, right? And you were pissed off as hell at the world and your parents, you ran away from this school, that you're not going to call your best friend. And honestly, I think after that call with that guy, kind of just set the tone of how I wanted to just step away from how his parents were handling that investigation.
Beyond talking to Daniel's friends and family, Keith distributed posters with Daniel's photo in the surrounding communities. A week after Daniel ran away, Keith told the Yuens he had an update. He'd received a phone call from a woman in San Bernardino.
She lives in Salvation Army facility, and she saw Daniel, and she saw the fire. So she called the number on the fire, and she said that she saw Daniel in a couple of days wearing the same clothing. So she kind of know that he's run away. And she even said that I asked him, what happened to your family? Daniel kind of refusing to answer it.
On that tip, Lisa and Wayne flew out from New Jersey to San Bernardino to meet with the woman who said she had seen Daniel. She told them that Daniel might have left town on a bus. Keith arranged for flyers to be put up all along the West Coast, from Washington State to the southern tip of California. The Yuens spent their days mostly in San Bernardino, hoping to get more leads. But for 2 months, the trail stayed cold. Back at CEDU, former residents tell me that things did not change all that much after Daniel ran away. One told me that staff dodged questions about Daniel by encouraging the kids to focus on their own personal development. A former staff member told me that kids came and went so frequently from CEDU that one missing kid didn't cause big waves. Staff and residents continued on with their rap sessions and profits and smushing. Then, about 2 months after Daniel ran away from CEDU, Keith Raymond got another call. This time, a maintenance worker at Hilltop Community Park in San Diego called to say that a kid wandered into the park, and he was sure it was Daniel. Keith says he got other calls around that time, that Daniel had been spotted sleeping in the park.
And then Daniel asked him that, can I sleep on the bench over there? And then the employee said that, no, you cannot sleep on the bench. It's a park. You cannot sleep here. So that's make them pay attention to him. And then they go back in the office and they look at the picture of Daniel. This is the guy. This is the same kid.
Keith brought sniffer dogs to the park.
Keith asked us to, send Daniel's clothing. Like we found some old socks that he wear that we didn't wash, luckily.
Wayne says the dogs picked up a scent. The Yuens were hopeful.
We were so worried that it was wintertime, really, really cold. We don't know how cold it was. So it was a big relief. And then we went down to San Diego right away.
This time, Lisa and Wayne spent almost a month in San Diego. Cindy Raymond, Keith's wife, helped them hand out flyers in the neighborhood surrounding Hilltop Community Park. And they received more tips, alleged sightings of Daniel sleeping in the bushes or standing in a line at a soup kitchen. When these tips came in, they would rush out in hopes of finding him.
We kind of husband and wife team and just like chicken running away our head and running around and ask people and keep talking to people. Did you see him? Did you see him? Did you see my son?
It was during this time that the Yuens realized that they might be facing another problem. If Daniel was still alive, he hadn't reached out to them. Perhaps he was grappling with a severe mental illness, or it's quite possible he was still angry about being sent to CEDU. If Lisa and Wayne found him, he might just run the other way.
So they asked me. They must have asked my mother, who asked me if I wanted to go out there, and I immediately said yes.
When the Yuens returned to New Jersey, they reached out to Nick Galeta and asked him for help.
I immediately wanted to go out there. I always did.
Nick flew out to San Diego. When he got there, Cindy Raymond drove Nick and Lisa around to homeless shelters, soup kitchens, back alleys, and parks where people claimed they saw Daniel.
I will never forget the sight of going downtown where these homeless people were to try to see if Dan was in line to get soup. And I was like, no friggin' way. I'm like, no way. This guy is in line getting soup. And he didn't call. I mean, if you got to get to that point and not call me, it was just, I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear to think about it. Every time I got somewhere where he was supposedly sighted, Cindy said he was supposedly sighted, it was just us getting out of the car and her pointing to where he was sighted. And that was it. And then I would go walk around aimlessly like I had a friggin' Dan detector on me.
Nick was only 16. He was still just a kid. But this whole search felt wrong and out of his control.
And I just remember being frustrated the whole time. Frustrated because here we are miles and miles and miles away from the mountains of where Dan was at this camp. I just kept saying to myself, we're here. Why are we not at the school? Let's go to the school first and then come down here. I want to see the school. I want to see these woods that supposedly this private eye scoured and they had a private helicopter going over the woods to look for him.
After a week, Nick and Lisa were not able to find any new leads. They returned to New Jersey.
It sucks, man. It sucks because it's like, I wish I could have done more, but what else could I have done at that time of my life, as young as I was? What else could I have done? I felt such tremendous guilt, and I felt so terrible. Every time Wayne would call me and ask me if I heard from Dan, and I would say no, and you could just hear it in his voice, like the life just getting sucked out of him, and I stopped calling. I stopped reaching out because it was such a touchy subject for me. It was clearly really hard for them. So I just stopped all contact, really.
The Yuens kept searching. For 3 years, Lisa and Wayne traveled back and forth from New Jersey to San Diego. They set up a website, DanielYuen.com, hoping it would attract leads, or maybe even Daniel. There's a password-protected message for Daniel on the site. The password is the name of Daniel's pet lizard, the one he brought over to Nick's house when they were kids. The search for Daniel consumed the family. His sister Selena asked for a trip to San Diego for her 12th birthday, so she could look for Daniel as well. She stood with her parents outside grocery stores and parks, handing out missing persons flyers. It was hard for all the obvious reasons, but made harder because some people were cruel. They would accuse the Yuens of being bad parents and tell them to stop looking because their son didn't want to be found.
The third year after Daniel missing, I went down there for a month, something like that, by myself to look for him. And when I came home, my heart's totally broken. Now I understand what is broken heart mean. It basically, you lost all your hope. You feel so sad. You cannot do anything about it. And that's why I understand why people want to suicide, want to kill themselves. It's because you want to get out of that hopeless situation. And your mind is just getting in a loop that thinking, why?
The Yuens filed a lawsuit against CEDU. In Lisa's deposition, she said she was shocked to learn that CEDU was actually a group home and not a boarding school. A former staff member testified that CEDU did not treat kids with depression, contradicting what the Yuens said they were told. In his deposition, Wayne Yuen said he became so distraught by the disappearance of his son that he checked into an emergency room of JFK Medical Center 2 times, and then into a mental hospital. He said, quote, "I still feel sad and depressed whenever I think of my missing son. I have no idea if he's healthy or sick, or if he's even alive or dead. Every night I either have difficulty falling asleep or wake up with nightmares. Every single holiday and every family gathering remind me that I have a son, but I do not know where he is and what had happened to him." During the hearing, a lawyer for CEDU's insurance company was brought to tears hearing Wayne and Lisa's story. In the end, the insurance company paid the Yuens an undisclosed sum of money to settle. In 2007, after 3 years of searching and hoping, the Yuens finally stopped traveling to San Diego to look for Daniel.
For a long time that within the family, we try our best not even mention the name Daniel because it feels so hurt. And it's just like a wound, and you don't want to touch it because you touch it, it hurts. And this is a big wound, now become a scar, but still hurt.
But then in December of 2018, almost 15 years after Daniel ran away from CEDU, Lisa and Wayne received a message.
Okay, Keith, this is what Keith told us. Keith decided retire. He's not even doing any private investigator job, and also he was sick too. He had a triple bypass surgery. So when he recovering from the hospital bed, and that's what he told me, that one day he opened his eyes and said that, well, I found all the kids except Daniel. I really want to find him.
The Yuens hadn't spoken to Keith for years, but now Keith was asking permission to start looking for Daniel again. He would only charge for expenses. The Yuens agreed. He would start with a more thorough search of the backside, behind the CEDU campus.
We did wire some money for him, and then he hired I think we mentioned this to you, he hired someone able to to climb down from the school back was really dangerous.
Nothing turned up.
Then he said, okay, maybe next thing we'll go to San Diego to check it out.
And this is how we end up back at that news story from Hilltop Community Park in San Diego. The park where in 2004, Keith had brought those sniffer dogs because an employee said he had spoken to Daniel.
So he went there and he walked around, there's...
Keith took photographs to document the layout of the park. A park employee approached him and asked what he was up to. Keith showed her an age-progressed photo of Daniel, who at that time would have been 31 years old.
And then the park employee said, look at the picture. He said, wait a minute, I saw him about an hour ago, or something like that. Keith would say that, are you sure? And then the park employee started describing, Daniel is about 30 years old. He was with a woman and they have a kid. The kid is a daughter, a girl. And the girl is about 2 years old.
The Yuens acknowledge that this is a big coincidence. That on a whim, Keith Raymond returns to the park where Daniel was allegedly spotted in 2004. And now, almost 15 years later, another park employee says Daniel was here 45 minutes ago, walking around with his family. How had Daniel lived in the area for 15 years under the radar, undetected? Why hadn't he contacted his family or friends? Would he really hold a grudge for that long, especially after having a kid? And what are the chances that he'd be walking through the park just 45 minutes before Keith Raymond shows up on a random day?
We believe that Daniel's alive and Daniel is in San Diego. Daniel is just don't want to call home.
Other people came forward and said they had seen someone they thought was Daniel as well. But there's another reason the Yuens believe Daniel is alive. After the alleged sighting of Daniel in 2019, Keith called the Yuens with another update.
Keith told us that he received a phone call. And someone said that Daniel's alive, don't look for him. Don't look for him. Something like that. So don't know why out of the blue he got a phone call. Many strange things happened.
According to the Yuens and Keith, Daniel is alive, and he doesn't want to be found. It's a shocking development.
So, to us is that we have his sighting, we have leads, and then all the leads certain job. So maybe he doesn't want to be found. I don't know why. Maybe he's scared. For 15 years ago, he might be really scared that we send him back to the same facility or a facility similar to that. But now, why he does not want to be found again? All I could guessing is that he might be getting at a point that he feels that he cannot return home.
I was obviously very curious to speak with Keith about the recent sightings of Daniel and this anonymous phone call. So I sent him an email, and within 20 minutes, I got a reply. Yes, he talked to me, anytime.
At the tone, please record your voice message. When you are finished recording, you may hang up or press pound for more options.
I called a half dozen times.
Oh, hi, Keith. It's Josh Bloch calling, hoping that we could connect today to talk briefly about...
And I continued to send emails. He did pick up the phone one time, but then he told me to call him back the next morning. And the next morning, no surprise, he didn't pick up.
So maybe just send me an email.
I kept at it for about 3 weeks. And then one day in October...
Oh, hi, Keith. It's Josh calling.
Josh, how are you, man?
I'm good.
Keith apologizes for being hard to reach.
Wait, so go back for a second. What was the moment that you decided to relook into this case? Like, that was before you actually reached out to the Yuens, that you thought, let me pick this up again? Tell me about why you chose to pick it up again.
Because I'm sick. I'm ill. And this case is in that case, it's always bothered me.
It took a lot of work to get Keith on the phone, so I decided I would just keep chatting with him until he ended the conversation. We spoke for 2.5 hours. At first, I found him likable enough. He told me how he started working for CEDU in the 90s. And like other staff, he attended a profit. He found it very strange.
They emotionally break them down to crying and divulging everything personal about their life that they've ever done, mostly about why they're there. The drug use, the sex abuse, or whatever it may be.
Sometimes he was hired to transport kids between programs. Often, he says, he would be called when a kid ran away.
Yeah, there's one road in and one road out of this school area. And the kids knew that. They could be in town in 15 minutes walking. They could be having a soda in 15, 20 minutes. If they were smart, many kids we found were at that local phone booth, literally buying soda, candy, and we'd sneak up on them and grab them.
Keith says Daniel was the only kid he wasn't able to find. His description of searching for Daniel squares with what the Yuens told me. But as I ask more questions, red flags start popping up. First of all, Keith says he was forced to leave town after he started looking for Daniel again.
You're talking about a good old boy department that just doesn't play by the same rules that most police departments play by. And now that they're in the spotlight like they are, there's a lot of older detectives that are just, I think, ashamed and worried, concerned that this is going to lead to some criminal type of investigation. If it catches on big enough.
I know the police have been criticized for not doing enough about the number of kids running away from CEDU. But unless Keith was hiding something about the facts of Daniel's case, it just doesn't seem likely that he would be forced to skip town because he was looking for him again. Keith then moves on to tell me about his theory of what happened to Daniel. He says Daniel probably ended up at that park in San Diego 15 years ago. He probably met kids from the local high school near the park. He probably told them his parents were dead. And somehow he managed to live in the area for years.
We do believe that Daniel met this young lady, was at some point allowed to live in the house where they lived together. Her dad owned some type of cleaning or maintenance company that Daniel was working these type of hours off the books, of course. You have no ID, off the books for a number of years, and was probably still is. At some point recently had a child in the last 3 to 4 years, and obviously they're a couple now. And he's been in this whole area this entire time. Now, can I prove that? No.
This all seems a little far-fetched based on the limited information Keith has gathered about Daniel. But the thing I really wanted to ask Keith about was this anonymous phone call he claimed to have received. Someone telling him to stop looking for Daniel. And again, Keith's response? A very big red flag.
And so describe to me, so you receive a message on your cell phone, and what does it say?
It was in the first person. That's, hey, I'm Daniel. I don't want to be found. I'm fine with where I'm at. I'm fine with where I've been living. I don't want to be contacted. He said he loved his mom, which was really unique and odd. That's the only person he mentioned. It's him. It's definitely Daniel. He knows the heat's up in that area. We've really made his life uncomfortable. And that's what the message, in generality, was saying. Stop looking for me. I will make contact when I'm ready. The phone message doesn't make any sense other than, why would this person with an Asian accent, not strong, not overbearing, have specifics that we didn't put out?
What Keith tells me is not what he told ABC News, or Wayne and Lisa. He told them an anonymous caller left a message, but in this version, it's Daniel calling. And Daniel has a light Asian accent.
He didn't have a Chinese accent. He was Chinese, but he didn't have a Chinese accent, right? As much as I have an Italian accent because my mother's from Italy, no, not at all.
Why would Keith's story suddenly change? Why wouldn't he tell this to the ABC reporter or to the police?
This was a message that was left to you?
This was a message. It was left. It's
So
amazing how
you don't still have that message, do you?
I can't. Oh, the message I recorded through a hard device. We kept that. Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, I knew exactly what I was doing, but
is that message something that you can send me? Maybe amazing to be able to hear that.
The parents would have to.
Sure.
Yeah. They would have to agree with it, and I would be. And once I'm receive of their approval, I'll do anything.
Keith and I wrap up our conversation with this promise. And then he asks that I treat him fairly.
Yeah, I just want to, I don't mean to disrespect, I just want to keep this on a professional, even keel. I'm not in a position to get character assassinated right now. I'm not. I just don't think my health could deal with it.
And he promises again he will send the recording of Daniel's voicemail message. A week after that phone call, I follow up with an email. This was his response. Josh, I'm bedridden, on some severe pain medication, unable to sit up, being told I have 48 to 72 hours. I'm sorry, I think I've run my last race. Is Keith dying? I write back, Keith, I'm so sorry to hear that. What hospital are you at? Would you like me to notify the Yuens for you? The next day, I get another email. This one from Keith's account, but apparently not from Keith himself. Hello. After looking at this email, it appears my brother was willingly emailing you. Nobody in our family knew he was in this position or condition. We're sorry, however, he won't be able to assist any further. Our family thanks you for your understanding in this matter. From Steve Raymond, stepbrother to my younger brother, Keith Raymond. I never heard from Keith again. For months, I've Googled his name looking for any kind of death notice or news story. Nothing. I have no idea if Keith Raymond is alive or dead. I have no idea if he was even sick. I told Lisa and Wayne about this, that Keith claimed to have a voicemail message of their son, of Daniel. They did not seem surprised. They strongly believe Daniel is alive, but just still upset with them for sending him away. When I tell them about Keith's email, that he was given 48 hours to live, again, they were saddened, but unfazed. It sounds like you've always had faith, though, that he's being honest, that it's not...
he never lied to us.
Have you ever...
I told you, everything he told us, we are able to confirm ourselves, by ourselves, not by him.
Dan is somebody who I think about every single day.
Nick Galeta still lives a 15-minute drive from the Yuens' home. He had lost contact with them over the years, but that changed when Nick heard about the renewed search for his friend.
I called Wayne. It probably took me a week and a half to build up enough courage to call Wayne. Because it sucked, man. It sucked hearing his voice, dude. And he sounded the same. Except for the fact that, it was obviously you could just hear it in his voice, the toll that it's taken on the family. I just said, Wayne, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. And I'm sorry that, it took me so long to call you. Calling him, man, oh, man, I don't think I've been that nervous in my life.
And how did he respond to that?
He said it was okay. That's what he kept saying. That's what he's always been infamous for saying, is it's okay. He was saying that, it wasn't my fault. I think he's even come to terms that they felt it wasn't their fault either. We tried to do what we could for Dan before he went, and even after.
If we can turn back the clock or turn back the time, probably we said, okay, well, let him do whatever he wants to do. We don't have to be so focused on the education.
You have a unique understanding into the position that parents are in when they make the choice to send their kids to these programs. And, for people who don't understand that, like why a parent would send a kid to a program today, can you just explain that again? Like,
it's just simple. People send a kid to those programs. None of them are bad parents. They're good parents. They love their kids so much. And because they love their kids so much, they get into fear. They're afraid that bad things happen to their kids. They want help. They lie to us, period. And, from now on, I don't trust anybody. That's it.
Some parents of kids that have died or disappeared from the so-called troubled teen programs ended up speaking out against the industry as a whole, lobbying for regulation, and testifying at those congressional hearings. The Yuens have not gone that route. They continue to focus their energy on finding their son. Daniel's story could be written off as the tragic consequence of risky adolescent behavior. A kid running into the snowy San Bernardino mountains with no provisions was up against the odds. Except we now know that there are so many Daniels in America. So many kids lost to tough love programs. Some, like Daniel, never returned to their parents. And others who say their childhood ended the moment they set foot in one of those residential facilities, or boot camps, or wilderness programs. What I've learned is that to properly answer the question of what happened to Daniel Yuen is to understand the harebrained theory developed by the founder of Synanon in the 1950s, that tough love could fix anything, and how that philosophy spread throughout America. It's the consequence of powerful politicians and celebrities endorsing these programs. How politicians and police and child protective services, the agencies supposed to protect children, often failed to do so. What happened is that an industry was built on parents' deepest fears about their kids, and that Lisa and Wayne were willing to do anything.
We were desperate parents. We want to hear good news. When you feel that you have no hope, and people starting to tell you that you have hope, things are getting better, things are turning around, you tend to believe it.
In March of 2019, the Yuens traveled back to San Diego for the first time in a dozen years. They printed 2,000 flyers with photos of Daniel, and they braced themselves for the excruciating task of once again asking strangers to help find their son. This podcast was produced by David McDougall, Kathleen Goldhar, and me. Our associate producer is Max Miller. Sound design and mixing by Mitchell Stuart. Additional producing by Medium Anonymous and Todd Nilssen. Executive producing by Amanda McPhillips, Nathan Ament, Kathleen Goldhar, and myself. Our UCP audio team includes Dawn Olmsted, Jessica Grimshaw, Jennifer Sears, Rachel Hadasurjo, and Susanna Rooney. A special thank you to Beth Karras for legal research for this series. Also thank you to Athena Karkanis, Mark Babbitts for the recording of an encounter therapy session, and to Michelle Shepard for reading the testimony from Nikki Bush. This is a UCP audio podcast. For more information, go to our website, ucpaudio.com.